Before we move further into our wilderness training component, we need to understand that survival first begins in the home. It is very likely that during an actual crisis or disaster situation that we'll be at home when it happens. So we must know the risks associated with the area in which we live. Is your area more prone to wildfires and earthquakes or flooding and tornadoes? Whatever it may be, we need to know the risks that we're going to most likely deal with in our personal time of crisis. And then we prepare to mitigate those risks. Now, FEMA recommends that every person in your family should have at least a 2-week supply of shelf-stable food at the ready. So when you're building your storm or emergency kit, store a variety of shelf-stable food. And don't put all of your eggs in one basket. I mean, just imagine having to eat MREs for 2 straight weeks, every member in your family. My kids would punch me in the face. So my wife would probably do worse than that. That is not where you want to invest all your money. Add some variety. Have a little bit of MREs, have a little bit of freeze-dried, have a little bit of fresh canned. Think outside the box on how you secure and save that food supply. That's very important to remember. When we're talking a power outage or a major crisis event that knocks power out for an undetermined amount of time, we're told that food will begin to spoil, refrigerated food that is, within as few as 4 hours. Now, within the scheme of things, a lot of us have a deep freeze. So is all the food going to be spoiled within 4 hours? No, it's just not. It could take 1 to 3 days for that food to fully thaw out, at which point we must begin cooking it or doing something with it. And that often brings to question, when do we eat the food that we have? Do we eat it immediately, or do we try to smoke it or prolong it and save it even longer? That's really up to you as an individual and your personal skill set. In my specific situation, I may be able to dehydrate a little bit, smoke a little bit, but I'm not going to be able to save it all. So we're just going to eat it. The more you eat, the longer you're going to be able to ultimately last through your specific crisis, so far as not going hungry. Now, for every 3,500 calories that you ingest, you're adding about a pound of body weight on. So if you can enter into a survival situation with some extra survival muscle on your belly, that's a good thing, because you're going to be able to last a little bit longer as it burns back off. You'll deplete those calories, and then whatever you start feeding back your body with is going to be in that survival mode. You're going to have to do a lot of things to be able to add those calories back once they're gone, obviously. But ultimately, that's our idea. We want to enter into it a little heavier than we go into it. Now, all of the gear that I have before me is from my personal survival tote. This is the one that stays at home. This goes in our emergency shelter in case of storms, etc. Now, on my specific piece of property, there was a root cellar that was poured in 1945. So it's got cinder block walls, a poured ceiling, and a poured floor, all concrete, and it has 3 to 6 feet of dirt all around it. It's in pretty good shape. We use it on a regular basis. We've poured in a gravel floor just to get us away from where it used to leak. We've patched it and then put some gravel down. Now it's very comfortable, and it holds a fairly consistent temperature all year round, as long as I remember to close the door. But that said, I keep this tote down in the root cellar or in the storm shelter, and it fits me very well. I also store my family's gear not in a mobile tote, but in 2 55-gallon food grade drums with a locking lid. So the big lid goes on top, it's waterproof, and then it locks on so that that thing can be used as a float if you needed it to be one, and it's going to do the job awesome. So that's what I store my family's equipment in. Then we have a specific food tote as well. So we're pretty well set up as a family, and that's something you have to take into consideration for your own family, is that even though I have a nice little kit set out before me, every single family member needs one. Because if for whatever reason I am separated or one of my children are separated, they have a smaller kit in their vehicle that they can rely upon to get themselves home. And then once they get home, there's extra equipment waiting for them. Or if we needed to dip into someone else's equipment, we're going to have that at our disposal should we have to use it. So in my case, we've got a big family, so I've got a lot of options, and everybody's gear is just a little bit different because we want it to suit their needs a little bit better. Let's look at the gear that I've got set out before me. Again, this is not my wilderness gear. This is stuff that stays at home. There are some overlaps, obviously, because gear is gear. But this stuff largely stays at home and it's not touched. So with this here, I've got a complete change of clothing. Base layer, mid layer, and then I have an outer layer that's warm and sheds water. I've got a nice t-shirt, extra pair of pants, a heavyweight flannel shirt, a nice fleece, oh it's waterproof fleece actually, outerwear, heavy pair of wool socks, extra pair of work gloves, and extra pair of shoes as well. So all of that, and notice the colors. I got bright orange. Okay, there's bright orange underwear, there's bright orange outerwear, bright orange and green socks. I want to be found. I want to be helped. I want to be rescued. I may need rescue signaling, etc. So I'm thinking ahead in that regard. So that's the clothing that I've specifically collected. This doesn't have to be very expensive stuff, just a comfortable pair of rugged clothing should you need it or should you be forced to evacuate in your pajamas in the middle of the night. You can go to your place of refuge, be it a storm cellar or basement, whatever, put on your good clothes out of your kit, and then you're ready to go. Take what you have and put it right back in the kit. That way there's always something extra in your tote so far as clothing is concerned. I've got my wool blanket. This is a full-size Hudson Bay blanket. This was a gift to me. I've got several of these heavy-duty blankets, and they are by far my favorite. When it comes to wool blankets, I would recommend if you're going to utilize like the disaster blanket or a cheap Harbor Freight or a military-style wool blanket, get two. Okay, two of those is going to equal one of these. Go ahead and get two wool blankets because they're much smaller and they're going to do you just fine. I've got a variety of lights. I have a green flashlight here. This is for hunting, but it also provides a good grief amount of light when I'm outside. It's an awesome light. I've got headlamps, a couple of headlamps right here. I've also got a cell phone recharger, and I usually have two of them. I think I just left the other one over in the box. But I do have two cell phone rechargers for my specific phone. If you're going to invest in these cheap little pocket juices, they're about $2 a pop at Walmart. I go and buy a handful at a time and charge them up to make sure they're fully done, just double check, and then we store them out. I also wrap them in something to insulate them because if they get too cold, they don't hold a charge very well. So with all that said, one of these will charge my phone to about 50% if it's at about a 10 or 12% charge. So this is only going to get you halfway there. You're going to need two to fully charge your phone, at least if it's a smartphone. So keep that in mind. I've got an emergency whistle. I carry the emergency whistle right on my person as we begin to enter into the crisis mode. So if we're going out for a tornado, what I do is the second we hit the shelter, I yank this out. It sits right on top of everything else in the tote. I take this out and I put it around my neck or put it in my pocket. The reason is if I am crushed or if I'm carried off in a tornado, God forbid, and if I survive it, I can at least get this in my mouth and blow on it a little bit to alert rescuers later down the road. Include a whistle in every kit. That's what it's for. Should you become lost, disoriented, crushed, injured, or trapped, blow on the whistle. Rescuers are going to find you that much quicker. Now, as a firefighter, I've included a bit more tools in my kit than the average person may want to take with them. Now, the tools that I've selected are tools that I have used while engaging in firefighter activities, in shutting down various types of utilities to homes. So the tools that I have here include a nice sized crescent wrench. This is going to enable me to shut off gas meters and my water should I need to. I've got Phillips and flathead screwdrivers of a decent brand. I have a pair of vice grips, a pair of wire cutters, a pair of wrenches that fit tools specific to my home, my UTV, and also my vehicle. I have some spark plug removers, a simple pair of pliers. I have an electrician's knife that could also double as a fighting knife for self-defense should I need it to be. And then I have 2 extra long wrenches. Now these wrenches just so happen to fit lug nuts on my trailer, but I can't get them in on my vehicles because of the way the rims are designed. But they do work well on my trailers. The real reason I have these in my kit is for popping padlocks. I have several padlocks around my farm because we lock certain areas so people can't get into them within the farm. It's a large farm, so a lot of roads going into it. So if I'm unable to access those keys, instead of trying to beat that lock off with a rock or something crazy, all I need to do is insert these and pop the locks right off or break the lock like that. So 2 large diameter wrenches like this, or long length, you need the length for leverage is what you need. 2 wrenches like this is going to enable you to open quite a few padlocks. So all of that material goes into this orange bag right here. Then of course I have an extra lighter and an extra can opener. Now this is a standard household can opener. I have this because my wife and kids are all very familiar with it and they know exactly how to use this thing. So I've got a few of these spread out in our kits. I also have military can openers, and then of course I have them as backups on my multi-tools. I have a complete first aid kit for myself. Every individual family member has their own first aid kit. So we don't want to take from one another's first aid kit unless it was that dire of a situation. Everybody has their own tourniquet in their kit. Everybody has some gauze. Everybody has a cravat. Everybody has some 2x2s, 4x4s, and 5x5s. Got all kinds of different bleeding control options here. The kids especially, and I throw extra in mine, have Band-Aids. Kids burn through Band-Aids. I barely use them, but kids burn through them. So I've got a lot of extra Band-Aids. Then I have my personal medications in here, primarily acetaminophen and ibuprofen. And then I have a towelette in there just to wash up should I need to. So, the last thing, some flexible gauze bandage here as well. So all that is my basic first aid kit. It's spillover that just goes in here. Now in my wilderness kit, obviously I have some more material, and then we also have a household first aid kit, which really doesn't apply to this. That's just something we keep in the home. So we have a household first aid kit, a lot of different options there. This here is my tarp shelter system. It's going to be the exact same type of tarp system that I'm going to carry outdoors with me. It's an emergency blanket, tent stakes, and a ridgeline. This here, it's a simple notebook with markers, pencils included. I have some mule tape. Mule tape is going to enable me to carry, drag, or climb, or tow whatever I need to. Up to 1,800 pounds of tensile strength in mule tape. This is 25 feet of it. So if I need to get out or rappel down or climb up, this is going to help me do that. And it's great for assisting in rescues. I have, of course, a simple bandana for a variety of purposes. This is my simple fire kit, very similar to what I would take in the wilderness. Gorilla tape, because it's gorilla tape. You need duct tape all the time for all kinds of different things, so I definitely carry that with me every kit. A backup knife, this would be my chore and utility knife. If I'm unable to get my big wilderness knife here, well, if I'm forced to evacuate that fast, at least I'm going to have something. And I'd rather have a little more than nothing at all. I have a water filter because it just makes sense to have a water filter. We don't know the type or the condition of the water that we could gain access to after a crisis event. So invest in a water filter for every member of your family. We know the Sawyer water filters are very proven, they're very effective, and it's going to last for thousands and thousands of gallons of water to be filtered, which is going to really help you out. If you're worried about chemical pollutants in your water, or you're in massive farmland country where there's a lot of chemical pollution and runoff, consider a Berkey filter. The Berkey filters are wonderful and they remove all that kind of junk. I, of course, have my weather radio. This has a flashlight, USB ports to charge phones and recharge my phone battery chargers. It's also a wind-up, so I can do that and wind it up. Works awesome. 2 minutes of winding will provide 30 minutes of radio power on this specific model, which is awesome. And then it also has a solar trickle charger. This does AM, FM, weather band, emergency bands. This was a really good investment for me. I would recommend getting multiple radios in a couple different brands if possible, so if one should fail, you have another option, and only use one at a time to make them last. So, nice idea there. Of course, I have my metal water container here. I have toilet paper. This is for, again, an emergency kit, first option, in my storm shelter. I want some toilet paper. And I recommend it because it has more than one use, obviously. You can make fires with it, you can signal with it, you can do pack wounds with it, use it for Band-Aids, a lot of different things for toilet paper. Every member in the family has their own emergency roll, and between 6 of us in the family, we have 6 rolls of toilet paper. That's going to get us by for several days without question. I have some readily accessible water in the tote, not counting water that's also down in the cellar. So this is just quick accessible water that I could drink just if I'm down there sitting around. I want to try and leave the other stuff I have stored as long as possible, and I don't want to touch it if I can help it, but these are easy enough to replace all the time. And that's what I do. Every time I sit down there, I usually end up getting in my water, so I'm always rotating that pretty quickly. We have a road atlas. Now, you do not need a topographical map in your home emergency kit. It would be wonderful if you had one. However, should you be forced to do a quick evacuation, or you find yourself in a little podunk town, like mine, that you don't know where anything is, a simple road atlas is going to give you the key information that you need and allow you to do basic navigation from one town to the next. And if roads are shut down, they've collapsed, or they're just gone for whatever reason, well, you're going to be able to find backup and alternate routes with a simple road atlas. This is something most of us used to have before Google Maps, and it's something most of us should continue to own. So make sure you pick one up. This one's from 2005. I probably need to get an updated version because roads around my area specifically have most certainly changed. Now, the last thing we have on here is our emergency food supply. Now, this specific food supply is designed for 72 hours. When talking about home-based survival, storm survival, etc., most of us have a pantry full of food to where we could get by for at least 72 hours at home. If you do not, and I'm talking to myself here because this is how I used to do it as well. Before I moved out here to the country, I was living in the suburbs right next to town. We would just run to the grocer every time we needed a meal, it seemed. The grocery was like 3 miles down the road. It's no big deal to run back and forth all the time, and we kind of went day to day. Well, now I'm 35 miles from the nearest decent grocery. We don't do that anymore. We're lucky to go once a month, okay? So with that in mind, we buy a lot more at one given time. You should always have at least 3 days worth of food at any given time in your home. Now, be it made from scratch, readily edible, whatever, that's your call, okay? And that's dependent upon your skill set, your capabilities. In my home, we can't do all that. I can make a lot from scratch, and I cook better over fire than I can in the house. So I have to get a lot of readily edible foods, lots of canned foods, lots of freeze-dried, things like that, because I'm gonna have to slowly wean the rest of the crew into campfire cooking and living and eating the things that I'm used to eating, right? So before you dive in and invest in this type of food, it's fine, most of us have it. Some of you, I hope, catch it on a good deal. Look at what's in it. You're getting oatmeals, pastas, dry milk, and rice for the most part. You're getting commodities, things that are very inexpensive in your grocery store. Yet we're paying up to 50, 60 bucks at times per box for this stuff. $5 in food for 50 bucks just because of the fancy packaging in the box. That's something we can definitely do at home. So I'm showing you this to show that yes, this is a wonderful thing to have if you have no skill set and you don't have the time, you don't want to mess with doing it all on your own. That's a great thing to buy. That's a great thing to invest in and have that in your survival stash or your emergency food stash. But don't, again, put all your eggs into one basket. Don't have this and MREs and expect to live indefinitely from that. Add variety. If you're not eating it already, don't store it, because in a survival situation, you're not going to want to eat it either. And your kids and your wife are going to hate your guts. They may punch you in the face. Mine certainly would. So I have to add a lot of variety. So with that in mind, I do this myself. I put my oats, my rice, my beans, some of my pastas, the smaller ones obviously. I like to reuse 2-liter bottles or gallon jugs. And I rinse them out real good. I like to bleach mine out to make sure it's really good and clean. And I take all those other foodstuffs, my dry goods, and I put them in my freezer. I have a nice big deep freeze. I'll put them in the freezer for at least 72 hours. Because throughout the packaging process, especially with flours and sugars and different types of dry goods, you get a little bit of pathogens that can transfer over. Sometimes there's bugs or weevils in your flour. It's pretty standard practice, okay, just because the amount and everything they're doing. By putting it in the freezer, you kill all that. You eliminate it completely. 3 days is what I like to do, because nothing's going to survive for 3 days in sub-zero temperatures in the freezer, whatever's in that stuff. So that's what I do, and then I take it out, I clean up the area with bleach, like my table, make sure everything's really clean and sanitized, best as I can get it in the kitchen, and then I'll start transferring. And I like to store everything in 2-liter bottles, again, or gallon jugs that have been cleaned and they're bone dry. Make sure there is no moisture left over in those jugs, or else you're going to know it, especially if putting in oats or flour or anything like that. Put the lid on. If you're feeling super frisky, you can duct tape the top just to keep the lids on and make sure no extra moisture gets in or out. And then I put them in my tote and I throw a couple oxygen absorbers in there, and I don't worry about them. I've had rice, beans, and everything stored for as long as 10 years. We ate it and it tasted just as good as the day we put it in there. So it lasts, it works, it's dirt cheap, and it's going to be a lot better than investing so much money in this kind of stuff when you can do it yourself really inexpensively. So keep that in mind when it comes to your food prep. All this fits in one tote, which I'll show you in a moment. Now let's go take a look over at the root cellar. All right, folks, we're down in the storm shelter. Now, the size of this specific shelter, it's about 7 foot high, by about 10 foot wide, by about 10 foot. So it's a nice round design, and it's just a wonderful little place. Of course, I got my trusty Coleman lantern here, and behind me is where I store all of our storm prep supplies. Now, right here, of course, you gotta have camp chairs or a cot, and usually what I do is I have a couple cots here behind the camera, and then of course I have some chairs. So if we have to spend a night down here, we got a couple cots down here so the kids or me or the wife can get a good night's rest without much fear of anything going on. We have chairs to sit around and just pass the time. Makes it much more comfortable than sitting on the gravel. Here in these big blue bins is where we store the kids and my wife's survival supplies so far as emergencies are concerned. So we have wool blankets and clothing and dry goods in this one. We have all their kit items and different things in this one. And what I do is when I seal these, I actually put a bead of silicone around it, and when I lock them in, they're locked in tight, they're airtight, there's oxygen absorbers in there, so that's why I'm not popping them open to show you anything in it. They're safe, they're super secure, and they've been well planned in advance. I have a smaller 30-gallon barrel down here, and that is loaded with purely food supplies. So in addition to the small items we have in this one, we have more readily accessible meals in the small 30-gallon barrel. So you're going to find things such as soups like ramen, you're going to find Spam, things of that sort. And then over here, this is the water line I told you about. So if I needed a clip, it goes all the way down, and this is actually 6 feet deep on the outside. So if I cut this line down here at the elbow, I'm going to get main water from the road, whatever runoff I can access, and then everything out of the house will drain back down through this line. So this is actually a pretty handy thing to have. Down here, under my line, I have my personal tote, which we've already gone over in detail on camera. And then of course I have some additional food supply, which is these freeze-dried buckets. So I have one of fruits and vegetables here, and then I have a 60-serving emergency food supply bucket here. So we have a 2-week supply of food altogether, counting the buckets, what's in here, what's in my personal tote, plus what's behind me. We have a 2-week supply for 6 people, which is enough for my personal family. Now that's just our emergency storm food supply. Why do I have so much food for 2 weeks? Well, I want to have plenty so we have a variety of options should we be forced to use them. And if a neighbor come by or anything like that, or maybe a family member stops to take shelter here, we're going to have extra to provide them with a little bit of something before they get back on the road or before we're able to figure out a new plan. So this is my little storm shelter. I hope you have something similar for the protection of your family. If you don't fret. Just make some supplies up so that you'll have those ready should you need them. While we're at it, I wanted to take a moment to show you my vehicle kit as well. So just like we have our home emergency kit, I also have another emergency kit in my vehicle. This one is very closely related to my wilderness kit because if my vehicle breaks down and I'm forced to walk home or do anything like that, I'm going to be a little bit better prepared to do so. So I have a full-size queen wool blanket here. This is a nice queen size, 100% wool Faribault blanket. Of course, you gotta have a nice pair of leather work gloves in your kit. I like these ammo crates for carrying my survival items. Inside here, I've got a couple bottles of ready-to-drink water, as always. Of course, I have some cloth bandana. I have an emergency light. This is a Luminade light. It's one of the inflatables. I have a secondary container. I have a Nalgene bottle as well as a metal cup because I don't necessarily plan on boiling or cooking anything. but I'm definitely going to have to filter some water, which is where my water filter comes in. So I have another Sawyer water filter in here, which attaches to the collapsible water bottle, which can also be utilized to put water in this. Of course, I have my Gorilla Tape, standard in every kit. I have some EMT shears that go along with the first aid kit that's included in here. I have some bank line. I have an emergency tarp shelter kit. I have a collapsible pruning saw in case I need to saw anything for shelters. Of course, I have a fire kit slash first aid kit, some fire kit items, first aid kit items in there. I have another backup Mora knife, tent stakes with the ridge line, 2 headlamps, a pencil for writing, and of course a notebook for note taking as well. And this is my basic vehicle kit. That's pretty much all I feel I need. Plus I've got all kinds of meal replacement bars up in the glove box. There's more water stored in here. There's a tourniquet up in the door. You know, I kind of travel with some gear. In the glove box I also have secondary tools for making minor repairs, another Swiss Army knife. So like most of us that are into survival and preparedness, I've got some gear when I travel. So this doesn't take up a lot of room. Goes back here and that stays there pretty much 24/7, 365. The only thing that swaps out in the summertime is I get rid of this thing because I don't really need it. But with late fall, winter coming upon us, this is a must-have item. So this is my simple car kit.